Alrighty, this is part two of the authentication lab, looking more so at internal authentication as opposed to things that originate from outside of our network. So we are currently we are on the domain controller, and I'll show you here. So what I just did while I was off screen, I basically just logged into the device. Nothing crazy here. This is my domain controller device, and I just did a simple log on to it. Just opened the console, logged in, very cool. So what we'll do, and since we're trying to take a look at different kinds of authentication logs and how they may populate when we do a particular action, we're just going to start here. So Windows Event Viewer. So I don't have a SIM set up currently, but I'll get one relative to our external authentication. So let's take a look at the security log. So security logs is where our logons and logoffs are located. So we're in here, and I'm looking for a very specific log. So you can see there's just a bunch of different logs, and it's almost impossible to look through if you don't have a SIM or a different kind of like filter. But Windows does have some built-in filters here, so we're going to go ahead and filter the current log for 4624s, which are successful logins. All right, so now there's a bunch. Prior to this opening this video, I had picked out the particular login that was caused by me logging in right before I started this video. And here it is. Now, based on what we learned in the prior video, there's some very important information just at the top here. So we can see that it's a logon type 2, so it's interactive. I was at the device, quote unquote physically. It's a VM, so it just thinks that I'm at the device. I logged into it, quote unquote, at the device with the administrator account from the domain of Lockout Lab. And here you can see a logon ID, which seeks to identify my session. So if I log off of this account, it should populate a 46, I think it's 34 for user log off. And the log on session or the log off session should be something similar. So it should have the same string here. All right, moving on towards the bottom of the page here. So the last noticeable bits of info here is the workstation. So I logged on from the local device, so it has a loop back at 127.0.0.1. You're at lab 01, so that's the workstation I logged in from, and we're at user 32. Pretty basic. Side note, I only release a user 32 for interactive logons, and this one I usually worry about the least. So um, let's go ahead and continue to something a little different. Let me check here. Let's try and generate some different kinds of logins. So we did talk about Kerberos and NTLM earlier, in the previous video actually. So let's try and generate some of those logs here. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my logs, but I'm going to go ahead and keep the 4624 filter that I have because I'm looking for successful logins. So let's do something real quick. So in order to kind of test it out, there's a few ways that we can do this. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to actually go ahead and make a connection to the C drive of my domain controller. And then this is just without even putting in credentials. So let's see, did anything populate? These may not be relative to what I'm looking for. Just making sure that nothing is, okay. All right, so nothing there. So what happens if I fail to log in, right? So there's a username, I'm going to put a random username, I'm going to put a random password. It's going to tell me that access is denied, super cool. And let's just clear the filter on this. And as we see it, there's a failed login. And logon type, mind you, is 3 because I'm across the network in theory. If I do one of these, right, I'm at 1.2 on a /24. Then here as well, I'm on a 1.1 on a /24. So they can talk to each other. If I do one of these, it works. Cool beans. So over that network, they can talk to each other. So that's why we're seeing this network level logon type. And let's take a look. So these are actually quite important too for 4625s because they tell you why something failed to log in. And I guess while we're here, let's go ahead and do that. Windows 4625, and this actually they have a table with the 4625s, and we can see why something happened. So this one, bad username or authentication information. So it doesn't get too specific about what was wrong, but let's look at the other portion of our. Where is my box? Let's look at the other portion. There's this 0064 subcode as well. Not here, which is fine, but I'm sure if you did this. Misspelled or bad user account. So this one's a little more specific, telling us that this user is not a valid user account. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and do the opposite side of the coin. We're gonna go ahead and do the proper account but a wrong password. So let's try more choices, different account. I know the administrator account is real, but the password is wrong. All right, so we should refresh 4625 here. So let's go ahead and just throw those codes back in. Okay, we got that. And let's do the last portion. This one, this one tells you about the password. User login with misspelled or bad password. So this one's a little more specific for us because right above it you can see that it says bad user account. So it's kind of the other side. Now, let's go ahead and get our connection to the device to it. So let's get this successfully. We're gonna go ahead and type in the right password this time. See, we have access to the C drive. Cool, cool, cool. And in the logs, we see this. So now, per the logs, this is our first encounter with NTLM. So NTLM is a challenge-based authentication method. I'm not qualified to speak on like explicitly what NTLM is, but what we can deduce is that this is what we can deduce from the log is that this is using NTLM. It's not using Kerberos. Kerberos is, I would just say, like a ticket-based system where NTLM is more of a hash-based system. So we have this hash-based login. And it shows us a few very important things. So it's a network logon, right? So I've logged into the device over the network after connecting to the C drive of this device from a domain joined computer. So if you do host name, does domain work here? Net user. I don't think this will work if I'm not admin. Oh, I am. So I'm net user slash domain. I'm a domain user. And it tells you what domain you're on. So cool. A little more information there. Now, I can actually do that for net user administrator. And now we can see it's DA. Cool, cool, cool. That's what we used to log in with. Very cool. That's also very interesting. Okay, cool. So I've also generated some Kerberos logins for us here. But, so this is NTLM because I logged in using SMB. So I'm sorry, I should have started with that. NTLM is primarily utilized over SMB. It doesn't even have to be SMB. It could just also be when Kerberos is not available. So it works locally as like a fallback. So typically, if for whatever reason the Kerberos service is not working, it'll fall back to NTLM because I would be surprised to find a network that does not have NTLM enabled. And here's that log, right? So we see NTLM SSP. It says the auth package is NTLM. It's very cool there. Same here. We got a workstation name and an IP address, things that we can use to track down the source of failed logins. and we see the domain and the account that we were expecting. So you may notice that when I was running these commands, I was running, okay, let's do net user / domain. What I think happened is it had generated us a login. It's not this one. So what we can see is that it generated us a login from .1.2 for user 123. That's the current logged in user. Current logged in user, right? So who am I? And this time it's over Kerberos. So in that instance, it did not need to reach out over NTLM. It just chose to use Kerberos. I think it auto negotiates Kerberos first, and then it probably just falls back to NTLM. But in this case, that's what we're seeing. Now, this one was a network logon. We see the user, we see the domain, yada yada yada. Logon ID, very cool. And as I was telling you earlier, we have this quite useful logon ID. And especially when I do stuff like this that's in Explorer and I'm like querying for stuff, or I log into, like, I'm querying for net, like user type information. So if I do this again, does it actually populate / domain? Does it give me another 4624? Let's see. Let's see. Let's refresh. Actually, I'm going to clear the logs. Actually, let's do this. I wonder if it's using LDAP to pull that information down as opposed to if this is local. I would assume that's what's going on, but yeah, I'd imagine. So every time I run that command, it needs to query the domain controller, needs to authenticate, and then it will give me the output of net user / domain. And here we're using Kerberos. We're kind of saying, hey, it's coming from here. We know the source workstations .2. It's from the user for that domain, and it's a network type logon. So even if you're not explicitly logging on, so like you're not explicitly at a keyboard trying to log into your account so you can start work for the day, you may generate different types of logon events where you don't see them happening. In this case, what's actually very interesting. Let's see. So this is 567. I wonder if I have it generated. And stuff like this is where the sim is really useful because I could just query for that login ID ending in 567. But sometimes when I do, oh, what was that? No, that was not it. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about autonomous logins from just devices themselves. So in this case, we actually see, while going through the domain controller logs, we see a login from the computer account of Labo1 from the domain FE80. I think that's IPv6 for local, and we're using Kerberos. So I didn't do this. It's just something that happened in the background. And if you're seeing logs where the account name is of the computer workstation name as said in AD, so if we go here, look at domain, and so the reason you can tell it's computer account is because it has a $sign at the end. And if you see these, I would say 9 times out of 10, they're normally autonomous. There's always certain edge cases where if there's a potential exploit that's running as the computer account, I wouldn't be privy to that knowledge at this point, but I'm sure it exists somewhere out there. But anyways, the whole reason I bring that up is because if you're trying to triage brute force alerts and let's just say you're looking at all 4624. So let's just say that you're trying to find a particular login from a user and you're not sure what you're looking for, so you're looking at every login. Instead of going down the list one by one, what if we had the ability to filter out where the account name is Labo $1? That significantly reduces the noise for me to look for the login I was doing earlier, which was from user 123, where I ran the command of netuser / domain. Okay, so we have those sets of applications for Kerberos slash NTLM logon type 3 events. Let me see what else I got. And also do notice that these logins are coming from the domain. So it's like one domain joined device to another. And you also notice that when I did this net user slash domain thing, this was over Kerberos. So it's kind of interesting. So let's go ahead and pop over to the Kali box and let's do something similar to what we did earlier. So let's go ahead and connect up to the C drive of the domain controller using the administrator account, and let's find those logs. All right, type in the password. So I listed these shares. So I didn't connect. I'm sorry. I just listed the shares. If I go into the logs, I see the administrator account logged in with the login ID ending in 835. We see it's from a device named Kali from .14 and it's NTLM. So it's not using Kerberos. It's just using NTLM in this case. So if I turn off the filter, what I mentioned earlier about, so when I listed those shares, it gave me a log in, and then funnily enough, it gave me an immediate log out. So how do I know that this log off is correlated to this log in? So with this logon ID that ends in 835, if I were to query for 4634s that end in 835 here, this kind of tells me that the admin account logged in and logged off. So what we're seeing is it may look benign in nature. It's like, okay, well, you logged in for 1 second and you did nothing, and then you logged off. That's not exactly the whole story. And you can also see some accompanying logs here. So 4776, this is the NTLM has a very specific event ID within event viewer with an Active Directory that says, hey, this computer successfully validated credentials using NTLM. And if we go, as we do when we work in this field, we Google things, you can get additional information here. So this event generates every time a credential validates using NTLM authentication. So not only did a 4624 generate, we also generated a 4776. So keep that in mind. Maybe cool information on an interview that you can use saying, hey, if this happens, then you might see a 4624 and a 4776 if it's NTLM authentication. Okay, so and we also see enhanced privileges given to this login session to enumerate the shares. And this is the event code, it's 4672. But video's running a little long, so let's go ahead and wrap up what we did, what we saw, and what we kind of know now. So we started off with interactive logins, which was just me logging into the device for the first time, looking at our logon type 2 interactive, and seeing that the logon process was from user 32. And then we moved to the more interesting type of logons, which was type 3, and we generated the type 3 logon over NTLM and Kerberos. So we were able to generate an NTLM logon here using this here, right? So I was able to go in and map or go ahead and connect up to the C drive of the domain controller. That gave me NTLM connection. And then this one, when I did the net user slash domain, this let me see a Kerberos authentication on the domain controller as opposed to NTLM. Swinging back to the Kali Linux box, we went ahead and mapped the share, which gave us a 4776. It gave us 4672, which is like bonus privileges assigned to that logon session. And we saw the log in and the log off using the logon ID. Last thing, I didn't get this to work last time. Let's try this here. Let's go ahead and remote in 192.168.1.2. Let me go back here, bring up the event viewer. Go to Windows, go to Security. Let's clear the log. Oh, wonderful. Okay. Let's open it with Administrator, which it definitely did not. Oops. Sign in as the administrator account because for some reason it's doing this. All right. And that would have also generated a admin login. So if we just refresh, we could probably find that. We should see that the admin account logged in from a random workstation. I'm getting sidetracked, but I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Do we see a login from workstation 1? I see from user 123, impersonation. I don't know when that happened. I don't know if that's relative to when I did that because my time on the local system's also off. So I would be surprised if that was correlated. Anywho, let's go back and look at our last thing, which is the remote desktop RDP. So I'm expecting to see a type 10 here. Let's go ahead and log on. There's a particular setting in Windows now that okay, does this one have okay. Guess we will just sign out. Switch user. Nope, it's trying to log on to the I wonder if I should remove the .local. May not work. Hmm. It might be working. I see a successful login. Hey, there it goes. Oh, I think my domain controller crashed. Okay, never mind. Let's go back to the box. Take ownership, please. Ah, okay. Anyways, we're back. Remote desktop. Return on. All right, so now let's go to remote box. Let's try again. I'm gonna go ahead and log in using the administrator account because I know that for sure has privileges to be able to RDP. Not sure about user 123 because it's just domain user. I would be surprised if it could RDP. But I guess it depends on my group policy that I have set up, whatever the default is. Oh, dude. Okay. So I don't know if it'll use NTLM because the server crashed. Or did it crash? What is going on? No, did not crash. It's just in a separate tab. Could we not? And now it's gone forever. Never mind. All right. And that's spelled incorrectly. Try spelling. All right, it's gonna try. Let's see what we get in the logs. Clear the filter that's on there. Let's go ahead and refresh. I do have quite a few VMs running, so that might be why. Ah, you can see the domain is wrong. Rogue box. Let's use, can I specify? I can try a local, so I'm gonna try this because I'm actually a little interested. Workstation 1. Let's try this. I wonder if this will work. If it doesn't work, I will do the domain of Lockout Lab. Let's see what happens. Doesn't look like it'll connect up, but that's fine. Okay, we can see. So I don't think the administrator box exists, or the administrator account exists to the degree I think it does on Workstation 1. So let's try the domain if it will let me. /administrator. So this is the domain administrator account. Administrator. Okay, so valid credentials. It sees the credentials are valid, and then it's going to try and get me into that box, which it does. Let's take a peek at what we see. This definitely did happen the last time I did this. Let me see if there's anything on the server. On the domain controller filter. Because what I'm seeing are event code 7s as opposed to 10s, which I'm used to seeing with RDP traffic, so I don't see any 10s here. And you could definitely filter this by logon type 10. It's just I don't have a SIM to do it. All right, well, I guess what we're left with is the logs here, which is logon type 7. Normally you'll see this as a logon type 10, which is RDP, but I digress. Sometimes it be that way in the lab. It's my problem for later anyways. Interesting caveat. This is something you also see is you're just seeing interactive logons from an account that's built into the system. It's just doing things over processes. ADV API we can use for web-facing authentication, but not important until we hit the external facing section of this anyways. So whatever. Next time we're going to go ahead and look into a more practical application of reviewing these logs as opposed to just running a login or running it from a different or running it from a varying point on the Windows operating system and then trying to see what it did in the event logs. Next time we look at this, I'm going to go ahead and just perform some brute forces against the domain controller from my Kali box, and we'll see a little more practicality in how we approach this. But with everything that we know about what's included in the 4625 logs, this should be a real easy triage here. So until then, catch you next time.